Hello Divination and welcome. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to create an advanced client showcase hover click design for Divi. This is the final result we're aiming to achieve. So without wasting a lot of time, let's dive in and let's get started. Alright, so let's start by creating a brand new page. So I'm going to come over here to pages, click on add new. So we can call this page whatever we want, and also this technique can be done on an existing page or a brand new page. So in this case, I'm just going to start with a brand new page. I'm going to call this page Advanced Client Showcase and click on Use Divi Builder. Now for this design, we're going to build everything from scratch. So we're going to come over here and start building. Next, we're going to add our columns. So we're going to go with 2 equal columns. And before we add anything in here, we're going to go into our row settings. Now in here, the very first thing we need to do is to come over here to design. And then we need to click on sizing. So here on the gutter width, we want to say yes to that and then reduce this to 1. The gutter width is the space between the columns. Next, we want to make sure we equalize column height and set our maximum width and our width. So here we're going to set this to 100%, and then on the maximum width, we're going to also do the same, set that to 100%. So now our design is going to be edge to edge. So the next thing we're going to do is to head over here to spacing, because we need to add 0 to the top and the bottom padding. So we want to make sure there's no spaces on the top and bottom. All right, so now what we're going to do is going to come back over here to content, and then we're going to go into column number 2 settings. So here we need to also go to the spacing. So I'm going to click on design spacing, and we're going to add our top and bottom padding, and this is going to be 9VW. So to add the same value to the bottom as well, we're going to activate this chain, and then for our left and right, we're going to set this to 8VW. And activate the chain as well. So that chain just makes sure that you have all your content or the spacing equal both on the top and the bottom. All right, so now that that's done, I'm going to click on save and then save one more time. Now over here in the second column, we're going to add our text module. So I'm going to search for it and select it. So in here, we're just going to add the name and description. So I'm just going to do that. And for our description here, I'm just going to say marketing director. And then I also need to add a name. So the name here is going to be Jessica Doe. Now for the name, we need to set it to a heading. So how about we set it to heading 2? Now, while we're here on the text settings, let's go to the background and add a gradient background. So I'm going to click on the second tab, click on the plus button and add my first color. Now my first color here is going to have some transparency, so I'm going to drag the slider down and then add my values between the brackets like that. We're going to add the second color, and by the way, if you want to use the exact same colors as I'm using throughout this tutorial, I will leave a link to the post in the show notes below. Alright, so my second color here, again, is going to have some transparency, so I'm going to paste it between the brackets. So make sure the values you add there are going to be between the brackets. So for our gradient to show, we're going to add this above the image. So I'm going to select that. So the next stage now is to add our background image. So I'm going to click here on the third tab, click on this plus button. So the image I'm going to go with is this one right here. So if you have your own image that you're going to use for this, just take note of these dimensions. It's 880 by 1320 pixels. So I'm going to click upload an image, and over here the settings, I'll just leave them as default, and then we need to go into the design and text settings. So the first thing we need to do here is to set our font and then our color. So our font here is going to be Lato. So I'm going to search for it and select it. And for my color, I'm just going to click on the color picker here and paste my color. And then I am going to set my text size, and this is going to be 1VW. Then let's add our line height, and that's going to be 1.5 VW. Now it's time to work on our heading text. So I'm just going to click here on this brush tool. So our heading text here is going to be play fair display. Search for it and select it. Next, for our font weight, we're going to set this to bold. Our text color here is going to be white. And our text size is going to be 3VW. And let's head over here to our line height, and this is going to be 1.6. Now let's continue the spacing. So over here, we're going to add a top margin of 9VW, and this same value also needs to be applied to the bottom margin. So I'm going to activate my chain, and then it's time to add our left margin and right margin, and I'm going to set this to 7VW, and I'm also going to apply it to the right. Now let's add our padding, and for our top padding we're going to set it to 32VW. Now moving on, for the bottom padding we're going to set this to 3VW, and then left and right padding, that's going to be 2VW. Activate my chain. Right, so moving on, we need to add a box shadow. So I'm going to click here on box shadow, and the style we're going to go with is, let's go with this one here. Right, so next we're going to add our horizontal position. So our horizontal position here is going to be 0. Vertical position is also going to be 0. And then the box shadow spread strength is going to be 7VW. And then let's add our color. So to add our color here, I'm just going to click here on this eyedropper tool, drag this slider all the way up, because the color I'm going to add is not going to have any transparency. So I'm going to paste my color in here. Now, as I mentioned before, if you want to use the exact same color as I'm using throughout this tutorial, I will leave a link to the post in the show notes below. All right, so moving on, we also need to add a CSS ID. So we're going to use a bit of CSS for this. So I'm going to click here on the advanced tab, and then we're going to come over here to CSS ID and classes. And then for the ID, I'm going to set it to photo display 1. So that's going to be our CSS ID. Right, so now that we have this, I'm just going to save. Now this module here needs to be on the left side, so I'm just going to drag it over here. There we go. Yeah, it's pretty nice. So once we have this all set, what we need to do is to clone the text modules 5 times. So let's go ahead and do that. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so there they are. Okay, so what we need to do next is to go into these modules that we've cloned, and we need to change the name and the images. So let me do one example, and then you can go in and do the rest. So I'm going to start here with this one here, the second one. I'm going to click on this gear icon, and this guy here is going to be John, and let's change the image. So to change the image, remember the image is in the background. Click on the third tab, and then let's look for an image of John here. So there we go. I'm going to choose that. Now, it's also very important that the size that we use here is the same to have our consistent design. So I'm going to click upload an image. And finally, what we need to do is to add our shadow color. So to do that, we're going to come over here to design. I think it's border. No, actually it's shadow. Box shadow. And our shadow color can be changed by clicking here on this eyedropper tool. And then I'm just going to paste my color in here. So now you can see we've just added our color. I'm going to save. So go ahead and do the rest. Change the images, change the names, change the colors, and then we'll continue. So once you've added all your images and you've changed the names, the next stage is to go in. Remember that CSS code that that CSS ID that we added? We need to go in and change it. So for this one here, this is the very first one. If we come over to advanced CSS class and ID, it says photo display 1. So what you need to do is to go into the second image and change this to 2. Save that, move on to the third one, change it to 3, and so on. So I'm going to come over here, CSS ID and classes, change this to 3. So continue and do that until you've done all of them. All right, so once you've added the CSS IDs, next thing you need to do is to go back in, and we need to also add the CSS class. So here you're going to miss the first one. We don't want to do it on the first one. So let's move on to the second one. So I'm going to click here on the gear icon, and we also need to go into CSS class, and this is what we need to add. So we're going to say hide, photo hide first. Okay, so we're going to save that. So what you need to do is to do it to the rest. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is what you need to add that ID to. So let me just do one more so you can see where it goes. So you click advanced CSS ID and classes, and then on CSS class, this is where you need to add it, save. So continue doing that until you've done it to all of them. All right, so once we've added all that, the next stage now is to add a text module over here to the right. So I'm going to click on this plus button and search for my text module. I'm going to paste my text in here. Of course, you can paste whatever text you want. So let's set this to heading 2. Now let's customize our text. So I'm going to come over here to design, heading text, click on the heading 2 tab, and we're going to change our font to Playfade Display, and it should show there because we've just used it. Next, we're going to set our color by clicking here on this eyedropper tool. I'm going to paste my color in here, and then we're going to set our text size, and it's going to be 3VW. And let's also add a letter spacing, and this is going to be 0.1 VW, and then our line height is going to be 1.2. So let's go ahead and save that, and then let's add another text module to this column. So I'm going to search for it and select it. I'm going to use some dummy text for that. So I'm going to come in and paste it in here like that. Now let's head over to design and let's change our font. So I'm going to choose Lato for this, and then for my alignment, I'm going to choose Justify. And then next, we're going to set our size. And for this, we're going to use 0.9 VW, add it here. And then for our line height, I am going to set this to 2.1 VW. All right, so looking good so far. Let's continue on by going to the spacing. So I'm going to scroll down here and choose spacing. Now here, I'm going to add a top margin of 2 VW. And I'm also going to do the same to the bottom. And on the right margin, I am going to set it to 7 VW. So that's only going to apply to the right margin. Now let's add a divider. So I'm going to save this, click on this plus button and search for my divider module. Okay, so show divider, make sure it's set to yes. And now let's customize this. So let's click here on design and then go to the line and let's set our color here. So I'm going to add my color for my line. And by the way, as I mentioned before, if you want to use the exact same colors as I'm using throughout this tutorial, I will leave a link to the post in the show notes below. All right, so let's add a bottom margin to this. So I'm going to come over here to spacing and add 7 VW as our bottom margin. And then we're also going to add left and right margin. So I'm going to set it right here. It's going to be the same size. It's all going to be 14 VW on both sides, left and right. So going ahead, let's go to transform. And what we need here is to rotate. So I'm going to choose rotate, and we are going to set this to 90 degrees. So the 90 degrees needs to go to the first item here. There we go. So now our line is vertical. So ideally, we want this line over to the left. So to achieve that, we're going to need transform translate. So I'm going to choose transform translate. I'm going to first of all break this chain, and I'm going to start adding my values. So to the right, I'm going to set this to 2 VW, and to the left, because we want to drag it all the way to the left, we're going to set this as a negative 17 VW. Okay, there we go. So now our line is all the way to the left. So that's looking great. The next stage now is to add text modules as well. So let's save this, and I'm going to add another text module. Choose text, but this text module needs to be below the line, so I'm going to fix that in a moment. Now let's add the names. So I'm going to start here with Jessica. We're going to set this to, we can set this to heading 2, but not yet. Now let's head over here to design, text. We're going to set this to Lato. Our style is going to be uppercase. And we also need to add our text size here. So I'm going to go in and set my text size, and our letter spacing here is going to be 1 pixel. So I'm going to add it. And then my line height is going to be 1.2. There we go. Now let's head over here to spacing. So what we're going to do here is we're going to add a margin, and it's going to be 1 EM to the top and the bottom. So that is when I add more names, this is going to work really well. Now here's another thing that we need to do on the ID. We're gonna add our CSS ID now to this. So I'm gonna come over here to the Advanced tab, and then on CSS ID and classes, on the ID, I'm going to say photo click 1. Add it right there and save. Now this needs to be below the divider, so I'm just gonna drag it below the divider. And then next, we just need to duplicate this 5 more times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right, so now what we need to do is to change the names and let the names look pretty much similar to what we have here. So here we have John Doe. So we need to go in, change this to John. And then on the Advanced tab, we need to come over here to CSS ID and classes. And then this needs to be set to 2. So you need to go ahead and change all the names that we have here and also change the ID and set the ID correctly. Once you've done that, well, we need to add a code module here on column 2. So I'm going to click on this plus button and search for code. I'm going to select it, and we are going to add this code snippet. So this can be also found in the post, which I'll link to in the show notes below. So you notice that now my images are being hidden. So if I remove this, you notice that we still have that long list, right? But as soon as I add this code, because this is photo hide first, it means that everything is being hidden here. So the idea here is to, once we've done with this design, when we hover over any of these names, it's going to show the actual person here and the name. All right, so go ahead and change these names here and add the CSS ID. So now the next stage is to head over here as well and add another code module. Now this code module is going to have our jQuery code. So I'm going to choose that, and then I'm just going to paste it as it is. Now this code here can be found in the post, which I'll link to in the show notes below. So make sure you go to that post and use this code. All right, so once everything is done and you've updated your names, let's do a quick preview. Okay, so I've updated all my names. So what we're going to do now is pretty much save and do a quick preview. So I'm going to click here on Exit Visual Builder. And now this is the moment that we've been waiting for. Let's see if this is going to work now. So if I hover over this, you can see it's changing to John, Tina, Jessica. So that is awesome. So this is our final design. So there you have it. Thank you all for watching. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up and do follow us on our social media platforms. By doing so, you'll be notified every time we release new tutorials. Until next time, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.